Hi. Most of you may know me as Fall from Grace cosplay. You've probably seen me doing things like this, like this, like this, and probably even this. But what a lot of you probably have not seen me doing is things like this. And that is a more accurate representation to my life and what I go through as somebody who's blind. A few months ago, I did a video about Disability Awareness Month and Disability Pride. I didn't really talk too much about myself or my experience. Like, I kind of just touched the surface because I mostly wanted it to be about celebrating others and lifting other creators up during that period of time. I've kind of like touched on it here and there, but I've never actually told my full story. And I get a lot of questions, obviously, as somebody, especially as somebody who doesn't look disabled or especially doesn't look blind. But fun fact, October is Blindness Awareness Month. So I figured I'd take this time to do an actual dedicated video that people could refer to if they have any questions, if they're newer, or just to educate themselves, or if they're in a similar situation, just to kind of have. I don't know. I was left alone without supervision, so this is what's happening. So essentially, this is going to be my story and my journey, and yeah. So I had glasses my whole life. Both my parents have glasses. Ironically, my grandfather was actually blind, completely unrelated to my disease. They're completely separate things, like not linked at all. So I was just used to having bad eyesight, and like I was very comfortable around blind people because my grandfather was blind. So it's kind of ironic. Anyways, so we're talking like glasses since kindergarten. And so when I was in 8th grade, I started noticing that I started to fall asleep while reading. If anybody knows anything about me, they know I'm an extremely avid reader. When I was younger, I would bring 3-4 books with me at a time. My parents, even at like 5 years old, my parents had to like warn other parents when I would go to my friends' houses to not be offended if I asked for me time so I could go by myself and read. It was just, I liked, I was a particular kid. I'm a particular adult. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, so reading was a big part of my life. And so I noticed that I was falling asleep. And I mean like 2 pages in, I'm conked out, So we went to a doctor, and I was diagnosed with what's called scotopic sensitivity syndrome. And for what I remember, it is essentially just like a super intense sensitivity to light. So the light was reflecting off the white on the pages and like zapping my energy. And it was also physically hard to read the letters, and reading out loud in class became really difficult for me because what would happen is the glare from the pages would kind of make all the black letters mush together to kind of make like a solid block and not individual words. So I started getting my tests printed out on purple and blue paper because that was what I found the colors worked best for me. My teachers, if I was in their class, they would write in certain colored markers because depending on the color marker they wrote in, I just couldn't see it because the glare would kind of swallow it, if that makes sense. I got made fun of a lot in high school. My glasses were tinted purple. It was a good time. But essentially, I had that diagnosis for like, I want to say close to 4 years. And if anybody's been through any type of health thing or has known somebody who's disabled or has even just been frustrated trying to get a diagnosis in general, like, you understand it can be a process. It can be a long process. It can be an extremely frustrating process. So my junior year of high school, I am like 16 or 17 years old at this point, and I went for my physical and I bombed the vision test. Like, I could not even read the big letter on the chart. It was so bad. So I just assumed, because I had glasses my whole life, that I just needed a new prescription. It had been a little bit since I had needed a prescription, so maybe I just needed a new prescription. So I went, got my prescription, I went back to school, and I was always an incredibly good student, like top grades in my school student, even though there was only 86 of us. I still like to say I had the best grades in my school, even though there's only 86. That's like a whole other thing. So I was used to like sitting in the front of the class and just being like a good student. Again, I didn't really have friends. So I noticed that even sitting in the front class in my AP Physics class, or the front row in my AP Physics class, I still couldn't read the whiteboard. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I just got new glasses. All right, whatever. So I went back to the eye doctor and he was like, I don't understand why you can't see. Like, I filled this prescription myself. And he almost like insinuating I was lying or like, I don't know. But it was, I left feeling like really frustrated. I felt like I wasn't being heard. I felt like he thought I was stupid. I don't know. It was a very uncomfortable experience. And I don't remember if it was a family friend or somebody else at the time. This time was like very traumatic for me, so I don't remember a lot about it. But I just remember getting recommended by somebody in our personal life to go to a retinal specialist. Because clearly the front of my eye was looked at and there wasn't anything wrong, so let's look at the back of my eye. So we went to that doctor, and I remember being the only one under the age of like 60 there. Because most people, when they go to a retinal specialist, they're older most of the time. You know, spoiler, I was gonna get real used to being the only one under the age of 60 at doctor's appointments. So I remember my doctor, he was really nice, the initial doctor, he was really nice, the one who did all the tests. He said, I'm gonna test you for this thing. It's probably not that. I've never even diagnosed this before. I've never met a patient with this before, but we're gonna do it just to rule it out. Because that's, again, part of the process of getting a diagnosis. A lot of it is just ruling things out, not necessarily confirming things. It's like, perfect, let's do that. They injected dye into my hand. They took x-rays of my eyes. And then we came back, and then a different doctor came in. And that's when I was like, oh no. And he said, so you know that thing that probably we thought you didn't have, that's like a 1 in a million chance of you having? You're a winner. So that's when I got diagnosed with my disease, which is Stargardt's disease. Essentially, it is a genetic mutation that causes vitamin A, instead of excreting from my body like it should, to be stored in an opaque form in my retinas. And obviously it should not be there. So then it causes damage to my retina and my macula. So I'll insert like x-ray. I have so many x-rays and pictures, it's kind of crazy. But like, it's supposed to look like this and straight across. Mine is like this from damage. And this is where your rods and cones are also stored. And those are what are responsible for things like color and stuff like that. So because there's an opaque form in my retina, not as much light was getting into my eye. So remember when I said I started developing severe light sensitivity? So because there wasn't adequate light getting into my eye to process the images, because that's how eyesight works, is light coming in and then your brain does the thing. My pupils, as you can see, my pupils are kind of ginormous, like at all times. My pupils were dilating to overcompensate and let in as much light as possible because light wasn't properly getting into my retinas. Hence why I was always super light sensitive. So that's when we realized the scotopic sensitivity syndrome wasn't an accurate diagnosis. It was kind of diagnosing a symptom, but not diagnosing the actual cause of that symptom. So then he said the thing that I will never forget. I'm going to try really hard not to get emotional about it because I always, whatever, feelings. Anyways, he told me I was going blind. It's a juvenile form of macular degeneration. Hence why I was the only one under the age of 60 in the doctor's office, because macular degeneration usually happens when you're older. Juvenile, meaning younger. And he said I was like a textbook case for this disease. Typically, people get diagnosed in late adolescence, so your late teens, which is what I was in. But the thing that really got me, like obviously I was in shock. Like you go to the doctor and you don't expect to be told you're going blind. It was him saying, you're not going to be able to go to college. You're never going to be able to drive. You're going to have to move to a city and rely on public transportation. And your life will never be the same. And that last part is true. It's definitely true. My life was completely and forever changed after that. Some for good, but a lot for worse, if I'm being totally honest. And I always like to joke because that's how I cope with humor. Like I was emo, I was an emo kid. I stuck out like a sore thumb already. And I was already pissed off at the world because of other things that had happened to me in my life. So I already had a tough time and like was pissed off at the world. And now I had a really, really good reason to be pissed off at the world. So I remember kind of after that, just leaving. Like I said, I kind of, there's a lot of stuff I don't remember from this time. And a lot of it has to do with this and other things. But I remember essentially telling him to fuck off. And like, because I don't like being told what to do. And, you know, the shock and the denial. My mom was with me. She was really emotional. I think my dad was there too. I think he was there. It was a lot. And I remember taking the x-rays, leaving, like I just bolted. I bolted and I tried to tear up the x-rays and throw them out in a trash can in the waiting area. And I just bolted to the car and I just shut down. You know, because at that time, it was my junior year of high school. I was touring colleges. I wanted to be a vet at the time. I had worked my whole life for this because I wanted to get out of my town. I wanted to get out. I wanted to be on my own. You know, I wanted more out of life and I wanted to escape. And, you know, somebody was telling me, you can't do that because of something you didn't know about 20 seconds ago. I thought I just needed new glasses. You know? So, anyways, needless to say, that year was rough for me. You know, because then I had to register with Services for the Blind. I was already considered visually impaired at that point. Oh, going back to my disease. So the way it works and the way I see, and you'll see me tilting my head a lot. It's not just because this is my good side, but it's because I have no central vision. So the way the disease works is it affects the cells in the middle of my eye, and as those cells deteriorate and die, I get vision loss. So I'll insert a picture of one of my x-rays. All of those white spots are sick cells. So you can see it's the majority of my eye. The black ones are the ones that have died. And as you can see, they're clustered in the middle. So therefore, I have no central vision. When I look straight at something, I cannot see it. I can only see around it.
Further showing this is a test I got done to see the sensitivity in the central vision of my eye. The red heated up part is where I do have sensitivity. So you can see I have way more sensitivity in my left eye than the right. There's almost no sensitivity in the center part of my eye, if that makes sense.
And, you know, a lot of people ask, like, how could you not tell? It's one of those things that's very strange. When you have something your whole life, like, you just assume that's how everybody else sees. And, like, I remember times of, like, people being able to see things really far away that I couldn't. But again, I just assumed, oh, I have glasses, you know? And I played sports my whole life, and I was really, really good at some sports, and because there were some I was not good at. But, you know, and my body just naturally compensated. I started playing soccer when I was like 3 years old, you know? And I was looking at playing college soccer before I ended up going to the college I went to. You know, your body just naturally adapts in crazy ways. So then I registered with Services for the Blind in North Carolina. A lady came to my school and kind of showed me, because I went to a really, really tiny college prep school. So they didn't have the same like resources to things like that as a public school might. So this lady was incredibly kind. She actually like saved my life in a way. She came and she like, why is that making me emotional? Anyways, she kind of sat down with me and showed me different tools she had, like different magnifiers, because at that time I could still read a little bit, but I had to get really close. And if you've ever met me in person and you see me on my phone or anything, I have to have everything right here, and usually like this because I see best from the bottom of my eye. She was showing me magnifiers. She also told me about large print books, because that was like the devastating thing to me, was not being able to read books anymore. And I wasn't driving at the time. I just hadn't gotten my license yet. But then I'm being told, oh, you're never going to be able to drive. You know, telling a teenager who wants their independence so bad that they can't drive, especially where I grew up, there weren't bus stops. Like, I lived in the middle of nowhere, you know, like there's not public transportation where I grew up. And I didn't have friends, so it's not like I could call somebody to come get me. Anyways, so she helped a lot. And, you know, then I had to essentially just start adjusting to what would now be my new life, my new normal. And I really struggled. And again, a lot of times you're in denial. Like, they tell you, oh, you will not, like, and for people with Lyme disease, it's really hard because it's really rare. So there's not a lot known about it. A lot known about how long it affects people, or how it affects people long term. You can lose most of your eyesight, if not all of it. And then there's some people who plateau. But because I'm an overachiever, I was told that the genetic mutation I have a double mutation, and I have the aggressive form. Which, if you know me in person, like, that just makes sense. Like, it makes sense. So I couldn't just get one mutation. I had to go and do two. So, you know, it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when and how severe, if that makes sense. And that's also hard. Like, you feel this impending doom over your head, and you know it's going to happen, but you don't know when, and you don't know how bad. That's like almost scarier than the initial diagnosis. So anyway, so then I started going to Duke University. They had one of the top researchers in the country for my specific disease, because again, it's rare. There's not a lot known about it. So finding doctors, like, usually if I go to an optometrist, they have to Google what I have. Or I've had it happen sometimes where they get excited and they call people in to come meet me and, like, see my x-rays, because they don't ever get to meet people like me. Most people assume I have retinal pigmentosa. That's not what I have. That is also a debilitating disease that can cause total blindness, but it works a little bit differently than mine. So doctors get real excited when I come around. So anyway, so there was that. There was a long transition period. The guy I was dating at the time, like, really pulled back. We didn't last much longer than that. I had been told by other prospective partners in the future that I was considered damaged goods, or like they couldn't handle being like a caregiver when it came to that time, which honestly is super mature to admit that, because I don't want to waste my time, and you know. And then I started using my cane, and I could like do a whole series on what my high school experience was like. But I'll just tell some stories. People accuse me of faking because I was high functioning. So people were like, how can she do this, but she can't see? I was, and I mean, I still am an artist, but art was something I did constantly because it was a coping mechanism for me. My art teacher kept trying to persuade me all through high school to do art and not science because, you know, and he was incredibly kind. Again, I'm not gonna cry. Again, high school was brutal, and a lot of it I did bring on myself because I was picking fights with students and teachers. I fought with teachers a lot because I was angry. I was really, really fucking angry about everything, and I wasn't being understood. I was already seeing the world differently because of other things in my head, but now I'm literally a walking target. So, you know, I was like, if I punch back first, if I pick fights, then they're not gonna come, you know. I was a teenage girl. I was an asshole. Like, what do you want from me? So anyways, my art teacher was incredibly kind. He would leave the art room door unlocked for me when he knew I had free period, so that way I could go and get away from people and just paint. And my best work I ever did, the ones that won the major awards, the ones that sold for a lot of money, were usually done during those times. I had an outlet I could use, but it's kind of ironic. I found solace in a visual medium. So then it was like a reminder of what's gonna happen when I can't do this anymore. And yes, there's blind artists, but again, I was a kid. Like, I was a child dealing with all of this. You know, I thought I was all big and bad and tough. I was a kid. Think about who you were when you were 17. Come on. So anyways, back to how high school was brutal. I started using my cane. There was a time where I had my cane in my locker because I didn't always need it. Because again, depending on how tired I was or whatever, or if I was comfortable in a space, I didn't necessarily use my cane. I still don't. Like, I use my cane mostly at nighttime. If I use my cane, it's at night, or if it's during the daytime, it's when I don't have somebody with me that can walk me around, and it's a space I'm unfamiliar with. Anyways, I had my cane in the locker once, and he went in and he hid it from me. He took it from my locker. He started using it around. He thought it was funny, and then he hid it from me. You know, the main thing was people accusing me of faking or over exaggerating or whatever. And I'm like, why would I fake this? I'm getting bullied and made fun of for it. Make it make sense, you know? So it made life rough in a lot of reasons, not just the physical aspect, but the social aspect. I had nobody to talk to. I had nobody to ask career advice from in that aspect. Like, it was really hard. And again, I could do I have lots of stories. But anyways, so then it's time for college admissions. And I got into every college I applied for, but the one I really wanted to, I heard from last, of course. And I found out, and I was like, oh, finally, something's happening. And an interesting thing I learned was that from talking to blind services and all these other people, that helped a lot, was that 16% of students, like high school students with disabilities at the time, you know, this is 2012, so it's a while ago, but 16% of students with disabilities apply to college. So they don't, either because they don't think they can or for whatever reason. And then less than that even get into college. And then even less than that are able to go. So there's not a lot of us out there who are able and privileged to pursue higher education. So anyways, it's a big deal for disabled kids to be able to go to college. So when the opportunity arises, there's a lot of grants and things you can apply for. For some of the grants that I was interviewing for, I was considered too blind for some, because now at this point, a year's gone by, my vision has decreased. I'm considered legally blind by the time I'm 18 years old. Again, let that sink in. Think of the stuff you were worried about at 18. And think about what that would mean in the context of that. But anyway, so I was too blind for some grants, because some were just for people who were visually impaired and not visually impaired and legally blind. And then others, I wasn't necessarily blind enough for yet. So then there was like, oh my God, how am I going to go to college? Because like I mentioned, like both my parents worked, but like I did not grow up wealthy. So like there was no college fund. There was no backup plan. It was like, and again, which is why being good at school was so important to me, because I was like, I saw high school as a necessary evil to get out. So I was like, I need to do well in school so that way I can get scholarships. So luckily there were some grants and other grants that I did qualify for, and I was able to get almost all of my tuition paid based off of merit-based scholarships with my grades and being disabled. So that was like at least one amazing thing that came out of this, because I would be so screwed with student debt if you know. So yeah, so then I go to college, and you know, it was college, and I ended up not being a vet because I cried too much. I knew I would not be a good vet, you know what I mean? But I always knew I wanted to work in zoos, so zookeeper, you know, and that's where I am now. And again, that was another thing. As far as I know, I'm the only one like me in my field. There wasn't a textbook on how to become a zookeeper as somebody who's disabled. You know, it's a very physical job. You need these to observe your animals, but I still kept thinking about that conversation I had with that doctor, and I'm like, I'm not gonna let you tell me what I want to do with my life. I can't even tell myself what I want to do with my life half the time. So, but I was always a very goal-oriented person, because if I don't have goals, then my life would be chaos. So I knew what I wanted to do, but I had to figure out so much on my own. And, you know, there's only so much people can be supportive with. At the end of the day, like, I had to figure it out on my own. When I talk about when I do my panels on cosplay and accessibility, and I'm talking about accessibility and being disabled in the cosplay space, a lot of it comes down to what you want to do, because nobody can advocate for you like yourself. And most people won't advocate for you. You have to be the one. And not a lot of people have that fight in them. Like, there's so many times in my life I think about, if I took one wrong turn, I probably would not be here today. because of, just life sucks sometimes. So, it's just one of those things that, because that was a part of my personality, I was able to do it. But I also realized not everybody is like that. So I can't just, it's not a one size fits all when it comes to your journey through being disabled. And it's okay to have those days. There's some days where I just cry about my situation. Like, everybody's like, oh, you're so tough, you're so strong. I put on a good front, but inside is a very squishy jelly bean, and I am the biggest baby you will ever meet in a lot of situations. I have a lot on my shoulders and a lot in my heart and a lot of things I want to do while I can still do it. That's why I'm mermaiding. That's why I go to fantasy balls. That's why I do the things I do, because there's going to be a time where I might not be able to do that anymore, Long story short, fast forward to today, I have the career I wanted. I have the coolest hobby ever. I've met the most incredible people. My husband is like the biggest support because he has to put up with my bullshit all the time because I can be a nightmare because, again, I've had a hard life in a lot of ways, and it has not been easy for me. And a lot of that, surfaces sometimes. So he literally has the patience of a saint, and he's a nurturer through and through. Like, he helps guide me around. He drives me at night. I am able to drive now only during the day, and I have super special classes. I don't have them right now, but I'll post a picture of what they look like. I was actually the first one in North Carolina to get these, because when I went to Duke University and they did like my initial intake, they said, what is the biggest thing that you've been affected by your vision loss? And mine was being able to drive. I was always incredibly independent. I worked since before I was even legally able to, really. And, I'm an incredibly independent person. And having my mom drop me off at my job at an ice cream store when I was in high school sucked. Like, yeah, Mom, you're cool or whatever, but like, I want to be able to drive myself to work, and so they put me first on the list to try this prototype for glasses, so, but it's because I was honest with my situation and what I wanted in my life, and my doctors are incredible. They're like, literally incredible. But again, I also know that I'm privileged a lot in that sense, because there's many people who would not be able to do that. Like, my parents sacrificed so much to be able to get me the help I needed, because there were times where it almost wasn't possible. So I also understand that even though my life is not what I thought it was going to be, I'm also very lucky in a lot of ways, because I have people in my life that cheer me on, that lift me up, that celebrate who I am 100% good and bad, because it makes me me. And there's not really anybody else, who can do me like me. And, so anyways, now we're here. My vision has obviously gotten worse. I can't drive at night anymore. I have to use my cane way more now. A lot of people too, they may see me at conventions not with my cane, and there's multiple reasons for that. One of the reasons is my husband is usually with me, and you might see him talking to me as he's walking me around. He's usually saying things like curb, door. He's letting me know what's around me, because especially with lights, it like completely floods, my vision. Or if it's dark, I can't see anything, So he's constantly having to have his head on a swivel to let me know. The other reason why I don't always use my cane is for safety issues. I was mugged in college, and so if I use my cane and I'm by myself, I look like an easy target. People assume I can't see at all, so they're more inclined to attack me, So it's one of those things. I have my cane and I use it when I need to, but I also don't use it sometimes when I need to, because other people are jerks. So it's like I have to put my safety at risk in one way versus another way. And I'm like, okay, here, So if you see me at conventions and you wave and I don't respond, I genuinely just cannot see you. or I assume you're waving to somebody else. Because again, I can't see faces. I don't really see well unless there's high contrast. Going back to the initial diagnosis I had, the best way for me to read is white font on black. So, because otherwise the words get swallowed by the glare of the white. So technology, I would not have been able to have a job if it wasn't for the technology that we have today. At least one I would be happy in. So there has been a lot of ways where I can do things, and my current employer has been like amazing with accommodations, and the fact that they even hired me, because I have been turned down from jobs in the field I have because of my condition, even with experience already. Because again, people are jerks. And I'm not saying they have to hire me because of that, but they didn't hire me because of that. So when all this DEI stuff was going on, I'm like, great, my rights are being threatened, cool, in the workplace. So, but anyways, I am now part of a clinical trial, because when I first got diagnosed, I was told there's no cure, there's no treatment. Like this, your fate is sealed. Sorry, there's like 15 cuckoo clocks in here, and they kind of all go off at different times, so I have to stop a lot. I'm part of a clinical trial now because, again, going back to the initial diagnosis, I was told there's no treatment, no cure. That was one of the first things I asked, was like, what do we do about this? Because I'm somebody, I fix things, I find solutions. I don't like just sitting in a situation. And I was told there's no cure. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But this clinical trial I'm a part of, again, thanks to my doctors at Duke, because there's not many of me, they have, people who they think might be good fits for studies, and they called me. My doctor called me, and he told me that there's a clinical trial right now for people with Stargardt's, and I passed the rounds of genetic testing, so now I have my next appointment in like 2 weeks where I have to go up. And I have some videos on that. I'm not going to go on to that because it's kind of complicated, but the idea is I won't be able to get vision back, because remember those dark cells I was talking about? They're dead, they're gone, game over. But the ones that are sick and in the process of dying, and again, they're everywhere, the hope is that the stem cell therapy will stop them from dying. So to end it on kind of a lighter note, because I know that's heavy. It's a lot. I just want to talk about some funny things that happen as somebody who's blind. Again, like, I can't see faces. I don't know what I look like, let alone what my husband looks like. You can't really care about looks. But, so yeah, I have so many funny stories of like using the wrong bathroom is also one. Oh my God, the amount of times I've walked in the wrong bathroom. Thing because I can't read the label. And then what does this mean for my future? So because this is a genetic disease I was born with, like the risk of like if Ryan and I had kids, there's a high likelihood that they will also have it. If not, they'll at least be a carrier, but he has to get tested before we even have that conversation. I have a younger brother, because a lot of people ask me if I have siblings and blah, blah, blah. He has better than 20/20 vision, the bastard, but he is a carrier for it. He got genetically tested. My whole family did. Both my parents were carriers, and because it's a recessive gene, there's a lot of science involved. Again, I love science, it's my thing, but not everybody does. But my brother does not have it. But if he were to have kids, he would have to get his partner tested, and there's a lot that goes into it. And also because it's a genetic mutation, the likelihood of me having other conditions is a lot higher. The laundry list is long of my health issues. I have a lot of really rare, weird health conditions, and that's pretty typical of somebody who already has one. I'm also predisposed for cancer, especially since I work outside. I have to be super careful with my skin and skin cancer. I've had a couple scares. I've gotten some things biopsied. I also have vitiligo. You can't really tell because I am pretty pale, even though ironically this is the darkest I've ever been. because I moved to Florida, but you may or may not be able to see it, but yeah, there's like this big white patch. There's this big white patch right here, and that's one of the spots on my face. You don't usually see it because I covered up with makeup, but I have other spots on my body as well, and my eyelashes are, I have white eyelashes, or some of my eyelashes are white. So just a bunch of weird things. I also have to be careful with what foods I eat because it is related to vitamin A. I can't have things that are high in beta carotene or vitamin A. And when you're a vegan and you're told you can't have things like sweet potato or carrots or any type of squash article, I don't know what that means, squash thing, or gourds, can't have gourds, zucchinis, So spinach, I had to stop eating spinach. I freaking love spinach. That was annoying. So yeah, it's a fun time over here. Or I bump into things all the time. I keep joking that we need to put pool noodles on the corners of our house because I get bruises all the time from walking around my house, especially because like when it's someplace I'm comfortable, sometimes I get lax and I am not paying attention, and I also have ADHD, so like I be bumping into things. I have to have my husband make sure he shuts cabinets when he's done because there's been times where cabinets have been open and I've clocked myself in the face because it's right in my blind spot and I can't see it. But yeah, so I don't know. I don't really know how to end this besides just this is where I'm at. It's going to be different in the future. And people with my disease, like I said, even people who have the same diagnosis as me live very different lives. There's some people who I know who can do things I can't do, and then I can do some things that they can't do. So it's very confusing and frustrating, and but I've gotten to meet some really beautiful people through this. You know, I've gotten to do a lot of workshops with people who are like me. I've been able to help a lot of students who are trying to be zookeepers, either with my eye condition or something similar, and I give them advice because, again, that's not something I had. I had to write my own playbook. I always joke that I forced my way into this field kicking and screaming, and I made them take me because that's what you have to do. When you're different, that's what you have to do. You know, so I try and give back where I can. You know, zookeepers aren't exactly millionaires, so I can't, you know, be donating to research, but I can bring awareness to it, or I can help people in the ways that I can. And, you know, I'm never going to apologize for talking about it because a lot of it is also me still coping and processing because there's days that are harder than others. Like, I'm not going to lie and act like I'm this strong warrior goddess that I wish I was when I'm in costume. But, you know, and that's the other thing why I love cosplay and why I love theater, because for those brief moments on stage, I could be somebody else. And I'm not saying I'm not happy with who I am. Like, I've put in a lot of work to be comfortable with myself. It's nice not being the blind person for a minute. Even if it's just brief. I get to have that one moment where that doesn't matter. You know, except when I almost walk off the stage like an AFO, but it's fine. You know, details. You know. But all this to say, I hope this answered some questions, and if you're like me or know somebody like me and you want to have a private discussion, my DMs are always open. That's one of my favorite parts about doing this and doing panels, is getting to talk to people about their situations and try and help them, because times are tough, man. It's rough out there, so we gotta stick together in the ways we can, because I'm starting to be so... I mean, it's been a while, but I'm getting real worried about things. But, you know, but anyway, so I hope this was informative and not too depressing. But, yeah, so I'm going to go back to sewing because that's what I do. And, yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your October, besides being Halloween and being my favorite time of year. I also get to think a lot about what it means to be blind and being a blind person and how my life is changing and all the good things that have come from it too, and made me a very empathetic person. And you know, it's made me get a tough skin for sure. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this, and I can, you know, do videos of me using my accessibility tools. It's just, I honestly forget sometimes, and some of them are awkward to try and film because they're like big machinery, so I don't know. But I'll figure it out. But anyways, toodles.